One day, Edward was talking to Trevor when Douglas steamed by. He was pulling a train of heavy coal cars. "Come on, Edward. Stop gossiping in the sun when there's work to be done." Later, Edward spoke to Douglas. "Trevor and I are old friends, and you and he have a lot in common, too." "We do?" quizzed Douglas. "And what would that be?" "Scrap," said Edward quietly. Douglas gasped. "Stop messing that word! It makes me wheels wobble." "It does the same to Trevor," replied Edward. "He was being sent to the scrapyard, but the vicar and I saved him, and now he's really useful again. Even so, Sir Topham Hatt certainly does need another steam engine here." "Aye, he does, and quickly." That night, Douglas was still working. He had taken the midnight goods train to a station at a faraway part of the island where only the diesels work. He was just shunting, ready for his return journey, when... "That sounds like a steam engine," he thought. The hiss came again. "Who's there?" asked Douglas. A whisper came. "Are you Sir Topham Hatt's engine?" "Aye, and proud of it." "Well, I'm Oliver, and I'm with my brake van towed. We've run out of coal and have no more steam." "But what are you doing?" "Escaping." "From what?" "Scrap." Douglas shivered. Then he remembered Edward's story about saving Trevor. "I'll be glad to help you. They'll have to look, though, as if you're ready for scrap and I'm taking you away." Their drivers and firemen agreed to help, too. Everyone worked fast. "No time to turn around. I'll run tender first. Come on." But before they could clear the station, they were stopped. "Aha!" called the foreman. "A Great Western engine and a brake van, too. You can't take these." "Aye, but they're all for us," said Douglas's driver. "See for yourself." The foreman looked all over Oliver. "Seems in order. Right away, guard." That was a near thing. "We've had worse," replied Oliver, and they forged ahead. It was daylight when their journey ended. "We're home!" cried Douglas. "Shh," said his driver. "There are the works. We'll find a place for Oliver." Oliver said goodbye and thank you, and Douglas puffed away. The next day, Douglas told the other engines all about Oliver. "Sir Topham Hatt will have to know," said James. "Douglas should tell him at once," added Gordon. "Well, here he is," said a voice. "Now, what's this all about?" "Beg pardon, sir, but we do need another engine." "Yes, sir," ventured Gordon. "A steam engine, sir." "Well, unless one is saved from scrap, there's little hope." "But, sir, one has." "Yes, indeed. And thanks to you, Douglas, he is now at our works. Oliver is just what we need for Duck's branch line." Everyone cheered. Now Oliver and Toad are mended and painted in full Great Western colors. Duck and Oliver are happy on their branch line. The others laughed at first and called it the Little Western. Duck and Oliver were delighted, and so the Little Western it will always be. Donald and Douglas are Scottish twin engines. They're practical, peppery, and proud. They nearly always work together. One day, Donald and Douglas were chuffing through the countryside, hauling a heavy load. Down the line, Trevor the traction engine had been struggling with a big cartload of hay. Crossing the tracks, the cart's wheels had broken off. Then Trevor heard a whistle. "Oh no!" Trevor cried. Donald could see the cart. "Stop!" he cried. Donald's driver applied the brakes, but it was too late. Luckily, no one was hurt. "Stop being pushy," Donald snapped. "Don't call me pushy," Douglas snapped back. "You shouldn't have pushed me into the cart," huffed Donald. "You pulled me, you mean," argued Douglas. "Didn't. Did. Did not. Did too." Before long, the track was cleared, and Donald and Douglas were on their way. The twins were so cross they refused to speak to each other for the rest of the day. The next day, Sir Topham Hatt needed an engine to help Duck at the smelter's yards. "May I go, sir?" said Donald eagerly. "I only need one engine," said Sir Topham Hatt, "not two." "I am only one engine, sir," said Donald, "and I would like to work with Duck." Sir Topham Hatt was surprised, but agreed. Thomas was worried. "Won't you miss one another?" he asked. "I know I'd miss Annie and Clarabelle. I'll work better on my own," sniffed Douglas. "I have work to do," huffed Donald. At first, Donald enjoyed working with Duck. Then things started to go wrong. "Did you shunt those freight cars onto the other line?" Donald asked. "You said you wanted them on the other line," Duck replied. "Not that other line, the other line." Donald was cross. Douglas would have known what I meant. He huffed. Douglas was working on his own. He'd shuffled dutifully through the beautiful countryside. But Douglas had no one to share it with. Although he tried not to, he was beginning to miss his twin. That night, Douglas's driver took him to visit Donald. "I was just passing," said Douglas. "Have you come to say you're sorry?" Donald sniffed. This made Douglas very cross. "I've nothing to be sorry for," he said, and steamed away in a huff. The next day, Donald was in a bad mood. Duck could see he was getting too close to the buffers. "Look out!" Duck shouted, but it was too late. Donald's driver was very cross. "This wouldn't have happened if you were working with Douglas," he said. Donald knew he was right, and Duck knew he couldn't pull Donald back onto the rails. So he went for help. Douglas was sadly finishing his work as Duck steamed into the depot. "Donald is in trouble," said Duck. "Donald in trouble," Douglas cried. "I'm on my way!" And he steamed off as fast as he could. Douglas struggled and struggled. He finally pulled his twin gently back onto the tracks. He was relieved that Donald wasn't hurt. "Thank you," Donald said, "and I'm sorry." "No, I'm sorry," said Douglas. "I'm sorry," insisted Donald. "Don't argue about who's sorry," chuckled Duck. "Just be glad you're back together." And they were. Trevor the traction engine was enjoying his work in the vicarage orchard. Birds were singing and apples were ripening on the trees. It was a lovely day. "Hello, Trevor," said James. "You look as bright and cheerful as my red paint." "Oh, I am," replied Trevor. "What's that noise?" "It's the bees," laughed Trevor. "They're all in these boxy things called beehives. I'm taking them to the station. The vicar says his bees make good honey, and he's giving some of them to his friends." Just then, Boko, the diesel engine, hummed in. "Take care, you two. Don't make the bees angry. They might sting you." James didn't like being told what to do by a diesel, and he buzzed away. "Goodbye, Trevor. called Boko, and set off to see Duck at the next station. Bill and Ben, the tank engine twins, were busy arranging cars, but they scampered off when they saw Boko. I remember the first time I met those two, laughed Boko. They nearly made my eyes pop out. Edward soon put a stop to their games. Edward is the only one who can keep Bill and Ben in order, chuckled Duck. I sometimes call them the bees. A good name, replied Boko. They're terrors when they start buzzing around. James bustled in. What's that, Duck? Are you afraid of bees? They're only insects after all, so don't let that buzzbox Diesel tell you different. His name is Boko, and he didn't. I wouldn't care if hundreds were swarming around. I'd just blow smoke and make them buzz off. Buzz, 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 retorted Duck. The next morning, James arrived at the station to collect his coaches. The passengers were excited and keen to get on board. The platform was crowded, and the porter was in a hurry. Mind your backs, he shouted. Then there was trouble. The beehive fell and broke open. The station cleared like magic. James heard a familiar buzzing. The bees were too cold to be cross, so they buzzed around the fireman, hoping he'd mend their hive. But he didn't understand, nor did his driver, so the bees turned to James. His boiler was nice and warm. Buzz off, hissed James. One bee burnt his foot. Oh, ah, ah, oh. The bee thought James had burnt him on purpose. So it stung James right back on the nose. Whistled James. He had had enough. So had his fireman and driver. They didn't notice till too late that they had left all their coaches behind. They tried everything to get rid of the bees. First they spun on the turntable, but to no avail. They tried washing them off, but the bees clung harder to James's warm boiler. Then they tried smoking them off by going through a long tunnel, but still the bees wouldn't go away. It's no good, James, said his driver. We'll just have to go back to the orchard and fetch another hive. James's reply was drowned by the sound of buzzing. The vicar was waiting anxiously for James. When he arrived, the bees swarmed straight into their new home. Come on, James, said his driver. What you need now is a good hose down. Later that evening, James was resting in the shed when the vicar came to see him. Thank you for saving my bees, he said. It's a pity it's not Christmas. Then we could call you James the Red-Nosed Injun. Everyone laughed, even James. But instead, they decided to call James the Bee's Knees, which means they thought he was more useful than ever. One morning, Edward was waiting to pick up passengers from Thomas's train. Beep, beep! We're late. Where is Thomas? He doesn't usually make us wait. Oh, dear, what can the matter be? Sang the fireman. Johnny's so long, and never you mind about Johnny, laughed the driver. Just you climb on the cab and look for Thomas. Can you see him? No, replied the fireman. There's Bertie Buss in a tearing hurry. No need to bother with him, though. Likely he's on a coach tour or something. He clambered down. Stop! Stop! I've got Thomas's passengers, wailed Bertie, roaring up to the gates. It was no good. Edward was gone. Bother, said Bertie. Bother Thomas's fireman not coming to work today. Why did I promise to help the passengers catch the train? That will do, Bertie, said his driver. A promise is a promise, and we must keep it. catch Edward or bust, said Bertie. Oh, my gears and axles, he groaned, toiling up the hill. I'll never be the same bus again. Hooray! Hooray! I see him! Cheered Bertie as he reached the top. Oh, no! Edward's at the station. No, he stopped at a crossing. Hooray! Hooray! Bertie tore down the hill. Well done, Bertie, shouted his passengers. Go it! Bertie skidded into the yard. Wait, wait, cried Bertie. It was just in time to see Edward puff away. I'm sorry, said Bertie. Never mind, said the passengers. After him quickly. Third time lucky, you know. Do you think we'll catch him at the next station, driver? There's a good chance, replied the driver. Our road keeps close to the line and we can climb hills better than Edward. I'll just make sure. He spoke to the station master. Bertie and the passengers waited impatiently. Yes, we'll do it this time, said the driver. Hooray! Called the passengers as Bertie chased after Edward once more. This hill is too steep! This hill is too steep! Grumbled the coaches as Edward snorted in front. They reached the top at last and ran smoothly into the station. Beep! Whistled Edward. Get in quickly, please. The conductor blew the whistle and Edward's driver looked back. But the flag didn't wave. Then he heard Bertie. Everything seemed to happen at once, and the station master told the conductor and driver what had happened. I'm sorry about the chase, Bertie, said Edward. My fault, replied Bertie. Late at Junction, you didn't know about Thomas's passengers? Beep, beep. Goodbye, Bertie. We're off, whistled Edward. 3 cheers for Bertie, called the passengers. Bertie raced back to tell Thomas that all was well. Thank you, Bertie, for keeping your promise, said Thomas. You're a very good friend indeed. The engines on the island of Sodor like feeling responsible, reliable, and really useful. They work hard to complete their jobs on time. They don't like confusion and delay. But the troublesome trucks delight in mischief, and their mischief causes trouble, as poor Henry found out. Henry has had an accident and been sent for repairs, said Sir Topham Hatt. There are no other engines available, so Diesel will help until Henry returns. Yes, sir, puffed the engines, but they weren't happy. The engines didn't like Diesel. He was always being rude and always showing off. I hope Henry's mended soon, said Percy. He moves more trucks than 3 Diesels put together, agreed Thomas. Trucks are no one's friends, huffed Gordon. The next day, Diesel was working at the docks. When Sir Topham Hatt sees how good I am, he bragged to the trucks, he'll get rid of steam engines once and for all. This gave the troublesome trucks an idea. As Diesel shunted them together, they started to sing. Is that all you can haul? Henry's loads are longer. Is that all you can haul? Henry must be stronger. Diesel was cross. He was sure that he was stronger than Henry. I'll push you all at the same time, he said. The trucks giggled. Push us all, that's the longest. Push us all, you'll be the strongest. That's me, said Diesel, the world's strongest engine. And Diesel shunted 5 trucks together, then 10, then 15. Soon he had an enormous line of 20 trucks. "What's Diesel doing?" cried Percy. "He thinks he's the world's strongest engine," replied Thomas. Diesel didn't know the shunters had set the brakes on the trucks. The troublesome trucks knew, but encouraged Diesel to push anyway. "Push, push, push!" Diesel pushed, and he pushed, and he pushed. But the trucks didn't move, so Diesel decided to pull the trucks instead. Heave ho, you can pull, but we won't go," sang the trucks. This made Diesel very cross. He pulled, and he pulled, and he pulled. Ah! "Grease and oil," Diesel sulked, as the trucks laughed and laughed. Sir Topham Hatt looked down crossly at Diesel. "I thought you would be a proper dockyard Diesel, but I was wrong," he said. "Can you make up for lost time, Henry?" "Oh, yes, sir," Henry replied happily. He backed up to the trucks and the shunters released the brakes. Then Henry pulled away as easy as pie. And the engines cheered. Diesel was sent home in disgrace. But the engines had learned a lesson. "Even troublesome trucks can do you a favor sometimes," chuffed Thomas. "Like getting rid of the smelly old Diesel," puffed Percy. It was 2 days before Christmas. Many children were expected on the island of Sodor. All the engines were busy with the final preparations. Sir Topham Hatt wanted this year's carol party to be an extra special celebration. Sir Topham Hatt was now waiting impatiently for Thomas. "Quickly now," he said. "Our Christmas tree has arrived just in time. I want you to fetch it, Thomas. Doc can look after Annie and Clarabelle until you get back." "Will we be able to sing carols too?" asked Thomas. "We'll see," promised Sir Topham Hatt. "It would be nice to sing carols again," sighed Thomas as he set off on his important mission. Thomas collected the tree safely, but large snowdrifts lay ahead. "I mustn't be late," he thought. "Sir Topham Hatt is relying on me." Whistling bravely, Thomas tried to move, but he couldn't. There was worse to come. Thomas was snowed under. Meanwhile, the other engines waited and waited. They were grumbling about Thomas for being late. "Silence," said Sir Topham Hatt. "Thomas left the work safely, but snow has brought the telephone lines down. We must assume he is stranded." The engines now felt sorry for Thomas, and cold but confident, the twins set off to the rescue. Suddenly, we came to a drift that was deeper than the rest. "Help!" "Hush," said Donald. "I can hear something." "Probably the wind," said Douglas. "Help!" "No, listen," insisted Donald. "Over here!" "Oh, it's Thomas! Come on, the poor wee engine must be frozen to the frames in there." When the workmen arrived, it took some time to decide how to dig away the heavy drifts of snow. Thomas's driver and fireman, who had taken shelter at a nearby cottage, joined the rescue. At last, Thomas and the precious Christmas tree were freed from the snowdrift. Then they set off once more to finish their long journey. Sir Topham Hatt greeted them warmly. As a reward for all your hard work, you may go and enjoy the carols. Be quick now. At the big station, fall was soon ready. 1, 2, 3! Suddenly, like magic, the station was flooded with lights. Ladies and gentlemen and children, I give you 3 cheers for Thomas the Tank Engine and all his friends who have made this occasion possible. Then there was a familiar whirring sound. Percy and Toby smiled. They knew who it was. With landing lights shining brightly, Harold the helicopter touched down gently in the snow. Bringing the greatest surprise of all, Santa Claus. Everyone cheered and the party began. It's no fun getting stuck in the snow, whispered Thomas to Percy, but it was worth it for this party. Happy holiday, Percy. Happy holiday, everyone.